Okay, good morning, everyone. We have four people with us at this point, including me. We have Irving, Thomas, Jason, who's incognito, but that's okay. And I apologize again for being on the blurry side. I haven't figured out why I am yet. In any case, we have some interesting topics today. I'm not sure whether we've done some of them before, so if we have, someone tell me so and we'll skip it. The first one is, it's kind of the topic is somewhat weird. It's returning traditional jujitsu to reality training. And I think the issue is learning and demonstrating the art versus reality or street training. And this issue came up because there are some styles that, as I said before, some people are going to say, you've said that many times, they can, both partners cooperate with each other 100%. They're pre-training their routines. They know their sequences. They look beautiful on the mat when they're working out, but they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag in a real situation. And then there's some other systems where looking pretty is not the point, and some of the stuff you look at and you say, how can it work? But it does on the street, in street type situations. So perhaps one of the issues is what it says creating active self-defense scenarios. And I think we've been through this before, because I think I sent out a 2 or 3, 4 page of various things that we did in my dojo. I think who is it? Can't think of his name now because he's not here. He's usually with us on Saturday mornings. He's in Florida. Why'd the name brain go blank? But Dave Clark, he has some processes, or things that his students do for quote unquote reality training. And I guess the issue is what is the intent of jujitsu if not for self-defense? Are you just, and this can apply to other arts as well. It's not exclusive to jujitsu. Are you training just to learn how to do things properly and become perfect at something? And that's your goal, which is a legitimate goal. Or are you more concerned about, your personal self-defense and getting practice in that area? So I don't know which is the goal for some people. Anyone want to step into that, for lack of a better phrase?
You can get both at the same time. The first group that you described, and I've watched some of the videos, it is very impressive when they're choreographed and working together. But I look at that like doing dressage on a horse. I can't see any value in it from a self-defense standpoint, or whatever riding a horse doing dressage would do. But they enjoy doing it, and the activity of learning to be skilled and communicating with your partner, which I guess picking the dressage works there too. That in itself is just another skill to learn, and better than not doing anything.
Okay. Irving,
Mind if I take a,
or Jason?
sorry, go ahead. Mind if I take a crack at this?
Sure.
So there's the dynamics, and be honest with you, and the way teachers teach is a lot different than it was in your era. Now, I'm a lot younger than some of you, but the reality is my teachers were different. They taught in a different generation. They taught in a different in a way. And one of my teachers, Ron Yamamoto, who passed in 2012, old school, pre-World War II. He had law enforcement and military training and incorporated into the Takushin Sogo system. But then my Danzan-Ryu teacher, who I'd been with 30 years, who passed, he was under Professor Hudson, and Professor Hudson's still alive. And but those guys, they taught differently, and the way they understood the material and the way it was implied. So Ron was combat driven. His techniques were different. The Danzan-Ryu group that I've been with for a long time, they practice in theory, but I don't know if they ever applied this. They didn't have that psychological, that they never dealt with, and they've dealt with the same people and they've dealt the same routines. But some of the guys never, I don't think ever really were in a situation to put themselves in a situation to actually battle test this, because a lot of stuff that I've learned and seen, even when I grab somebody's wrist and I take them down to the ground or detain somebody, things change. The user's not going to sit there. And this is why I'm saying this, is because what I've seen, what I've learned, and everything I've done for thousands of times over, the way my body mechanics, my positioning and my position, what we call, well, they don't call it this way anymore, but when I learned, it was called position advantage in law enforcement position and interrogation, right? You have the PLI and PALI. Today it's a little different, but the reality is you set yourself in a position, and you set yourself up in a way that you can apply if it comes down to, if your communication fails, it applies itself, and it puts yourself in a situation of advantage, right? I don't know if some of you are law enforcement officers or even military, but it's applicable to what we're talking about here. And because in reality, people aren't going to sit there and let you grab them. I guarantee you. The first time, and it's usually a panic fear mode. You all know this. And if you've been in this, you've been teaching martial arts and even reality, such a traditional versus reality self-defense. You all know somebody's not going to sit there and say, okay, you can grab me. You can put me to the ground. We all know this. They go to their fear factor. They go in this panic mode. They pull away automatically. They're gonna move from you. Then they're gonna hit you. Their adrenaline, and then it's gonna be 10 times harder later because they're gonna be pissed off that you even tried something, you failed. And a lot of the things I've seen in traditional, almost 40-50% of it, I'll be honest with you. And I mean, there's times it could have failed a person, and actually the person could have got hurt. And I've seen this in real life, where you see these articles where these officers have applied Koga method in California under Koga, and they try to apply a wrist takedown or kick somebody in the shin and knock them to the ground, and all of a sudden this person pulls a knife and the landscape changes, right? We all know this. It's going to change. Or they try to take a gun, or they get the officer's gun from them. It's not always going to be the way it is on the mat, and everybody has to understand that. And it's the situation changes. It can change in 5 seconds, and your life will flash in front of you. I don't know if you care to agree, but that's the point is it's not always going to be adaptable to street training, because the way people fight, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it today is a lot different than people fought. I mean, I can't even say that, I'll be honest with you, because they fought nasty and dirty and they cheated back in the day. They've done that for thousands of years. You know, everybody, they bite your ears off, they headbutt you, whatever. But the reality is, it seems like today's training isn't applicable, even like in one of the systems that Michael Davis Pasquale, when I got involved with him back in 1989, when him and Wally J, you could always see the difference in their method of how they do things, their techniques. Wally J was an old Danzan-Ryu protector. Everybody knows who he was. And Michael Pasquale, I don't know if you've heard of him, but I joined his group back in 80, both of those guys back in 89. And they were just different. They have a different way of teaching. And both the systems are great in construct, but not all their kata or patterns or whatever they call them at the time, techniques. actually would work in a real situation. It could if you have the upper hand, but you're not always going to get that upper hand or have that advantage, if that makes sense. So, anyways, I don't know if I lost you guys, but it's like you're talking. It's creating that active awareness and that being in that position to be able to leverage yourself to make those techniques work. What's your thought?
Let me toss a few words in here, and then we'll see what everyone else has to say. I know with my past experience with LAPD after Rodney King, one of the most interesting things that came out of it is the LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, have been collecting data for years in detaining people or things of that sort. And one thing that they said is really important is that 80%, if as far as law enforcement is concerned, 80% of the time, the person you're trying to restrain is trying to get away from you. They're not trying to attack you. And once you have that different mindset, it may change how you approach restraining that person, which was part of the reason LAPD put a bunch of different martial artists and different martial arts together to see what we could create for them that would work. And surprisingly, we came up with some things, and they've had a positive effect on the agency. The other issue is, I think, part of it, and yes, Seki was old school, and perhaps I'm somewhat old school myself. Seki never gave out quote unquote secrets openly, or how to make this technique really work. But if you got it, he'd tell you as an individual. He'd say to me, when I finally figured out how to do an armbar, figure for armbar, so it'd be correct 100% of the time, he'd say to me like, Joji, you finally got it. But he didn't tell the rest of the class how to do it correctly, or how to do it to increase your chances of it working. I think there's value in teaching how to do a technique properly. But Seki also put us in so many different situations and gave us so many different variations that we learned to adjust to the situation. And I think that's the issue. Are you always dealing with a given attack? You know what's coming at you, you know how to deal with it, or are you being faced with an attack, you don't know what's going to happen? Forget who I was corresponding with the past month. Years ago, I had to restrain a student. I'm 5'9". This student was about 5'10", 5'11". He was high on drugs. I had to restrain him. Arm lock with a wrist press wasn't working well. So I went to nerve right here. I don't know what it's called. Applied pressure. And I was able to control him simply because I would go back and forth between applying wrist pressure and applying pressure to the nerve. And my thinking was, it kept, his mind was messed up anyway. But by going back and forth, I was keeping his mind busy. And if it could keep his mind busy, I was able to control him better. And I think that's what the purpose of training in any martial art should be, is to be able to get ahead of the person. And that unfortunately, that means you've got to deal with random situations in your training. And
absolutely.
And that's the key. I was the only martial artist with the LAPD that was involved in doing their testing for their, recruits. And one of the instructors there said, well, we just say, we'd like you to demonstrate going into an arm lock for an attempted hit. And my response was, no, what you do is you tell the attacker you're going to swing at the other officer, and let's see what the officer does, because different people have different preferences. And I'm sure both of you know, or everyone here knows, that you can't expect everyone to respond the same way to the same attack. You're going to do
Exactly.
what you think you can do best without thinking about it, because that you don't have time to think, at least consciously.
No, that kind of goes back to my statement: the landscape will change, and
Yeah.
that's a very loose statement. But you don't. I mean, that's like when I said when people will pull from you, it's a fear factor trying to get away from you, not that they're trying to. And then if you do attempt something and fail, then now they're going to be 10 times more mad at you, and they're going to try to escape. They're going to try to do this or get away. And as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of the same thing I implied as well, that now you've created a different situation. And I think a lot of what I see is there's a lot of, oh gosh, I hate to say this because I don't usually like to stir these conversations up, but there's a lot of by the book instructors out there these days that haven't had a lot of real world experience. You have a lot of street fighters and brawlers and people that now pretend to be in MMA and want to have that. They create this false sense of security, but the reality is it doesn't take long for somebody to realize your weakness and take advantage of it in the street. It doesn't matter if you're martial arts trained or whatever, or you're a criminal. They do it every day. You see an officer get killed. He just got killed in San Bernardino, and I know it's a bad example, but again, a long time ago, you assess your scene before you step into something and run. Now people just run in the line of fire and anything. And it's not I'm not saying he did a bad job, because he didn't. But the problem is we get ourselves in situations that sometimes we don't have to be in. And it goes back to the play by the books instructor. Some of these people, they've done the same thing over and over 1,000 times, but then when that thing changes or it's modified, and you made a statement somewhere in, 10 techniques can be 1,000 down the road, right? Combinations of things, and they change. In one of your newsletters, you said something about 40,000 combinations, out of the basic core movements. And that's what happens in real life. You turn something into something else that you're not prepared for, and it can happen, and it can fail you. And I don't want to be a turd to say that, but it does, and it will. It can. We see it every day. You hear it on the news when somebody gets hurt, and I hate to say that, but it happens. Or somebody, you're doing, you're at the ATM, somebody grabs your head and slams your head 5 times into the ATM, and it knocks you out. Even if you're a skilled martial artist, you can't do anything about it. You remember back in 20-something years ago, they had a professional martial artist, and he was stabbed 7 times. Remember that? Back in New York? Do you guys remember that situation?
No, I don't.
He tried to. How about Rodney Hugh in Stockton just about 5-10 years ago? Do you guys remember that? He was a Goju-Ryu practitioner. Great guy. I met him. He was in Stockton. Do you guys remember this? And he tried to get between a woman and a man fighting out in the parking lot at a grocery store, and he got killed.
That's
you guys remember this? I'm just saying we put ourselves in position.
I'm not disagreeing with you, because all I can say is the first thing Seki taught us was never get between 2 people that are fighting. That's the worst place. That's you don't. And I've seen other people do that, and they get hurt.
Yes.
And you hate to say to them, they say, "What did I do wrong?" And my response is, as much as this is going to offend you, you don't get between 2 people that are fighting, because they're going to turn on you.
Yep.
I think what we're trying to deal with here is how do we get, or is there any way to get instructors that are teaching the art solely for teaching the art, so their students can do it perfectly, versus instructors who are teaching jujitsu or any other art for self-defense purposes, and yes, even I like to see my students do a technique correctly. But in a street situation, how do you say, perfection doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't.
And street situations are messy. Unfortunately,
It can be.
they can be.
Yeah,
And messy is that things rarely go according to plan. And if you don't train a student to have some sense of flexibility, they'll get stuck in that wet paper bag.
Well said. Well said.
And that's, I mean, I've even had, even when I taught at junior high and before we had campus police, and our security team was made up of myself, a karate black belt, a bouncer, and the boys' PE department instructors. There is one situation where I had to have help, and fortunately, the other person was there. And so, but the key is, or at least my perception is, the way I've tried to train people in Budoshin Jiu-Jitsu is that students have to have some experience in dealing with the unexpected, because on the street, that's what's going to save their butt. The technical knowledge is great, but if you haven't had the what happens when things go south experience, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to almost anything in life, not just martial arts, maybe. If you're trying to cook a meal and something doesn't taste right and you don't know how to fix it, you're in trouble. Like, here's my wife Adele makes a great chili. And by the time you finish a bowl of her chili, it's hot. It's just a cumulative buildup of heat, which is okay with me. And once it was just too hot for even Adele. And so her solution was add more meat. And so we added more meat, and that took away some of it. And then I also think she surprisingly added a little bit of orange marmalade. It added some sweetness to the chili, and that really cut the heat down. So if you have skills and have the opportunity to, you need to learn how to use all your skills and be able to shift gears quickly. And that's why, we in Budoshin Jiu-Jitsu, we stress the concept of mushin, which is you do things without thinking, because in a street situation, you don't have time to think. And anyway, so let me close my mouth and let's see if
you're good.
It's
well said. And like you said, you have to have an open mind, and you have to actually you have to be applicable to be able to be creative in a particular situation. And that kind of went back 20 minutes ago when I was talking. That's the same thing I was saying, is that what you can learn, what you've done 1,000 times might not work, and you have to adapt, and you have to overcome it, and you have to modify, and be flexible, and you have to be street smart at the same time. And like I said earlier, and I'll keep my mouth shut as well, but I like what you said. I do. It's on point. Anybody else have any input?
I got a couple of things between what you two have been telling us. Unless Thomas, you have something you want to go first.
Oh, I'll follow you. I've got a couple things to say, but go ahead. I'll follow you.
First of all, both of you guys are saying, hey, you got to shift gears. And how do you teach them? You cannot teach a person the instinctive survival. If you're fighting for your life or you're fighting in the street. And I've been told is that as far as a jujitsu person, when we teach our beginners, we say, expected to be the first one to get hit because those strikers out there are going to be too fast for you. They practice hitting all the time. And second of all, you got to do everything we teach you. We try to teach you to be perfect, but on the street, you're going to lose 50% of that. So you're going to have to shift with that. And little personal story, when I was in high school, I had moved when I was a freshman to a sophomore to a different school. So I joined the wrestling team just to get to know people and learn popularity and for physical exercise. Little did I know, a few years later, this guy that was Golden Gloves boxer, who was trying to be a Golden Gloves boxer, he got pissed at me and he, bam, popped me in the eye. And I suddenly realized, hey, he's a boxer. I'm a wrestler. What am I doing? So he came in on me the second time, double leg dive, put a headlock on him, started banging his head against a car. Next day at school, I lost the fight because I got the black eye. Then they said, hey, where's this other guy? And I said, well, he's in the hospital. He's got a concussion. But you have to learn to adapt. And one of the things that I should have prefaced with, I live next door to a warlord, and he would never let me go join the gang. He said, I will never let you join the gang. I don't want you to be this way, but we'll let you go play in the park with us. Playing in the park meant that we had fights in the park. And first time I went with him, this guy kicked me. I said, hey, that's not fair. Oh, man. My mentor just grabbed me by the neck and said, there's nothing fair out here. Why do you think we have pipes? Why do you think we have these chains? Why do we have these things? When we go see the other gangs, everything's fair. And that's when I first learned, hey, you got to be able to adjust to these things. And in the martial arts world, after I got into it more and more, what I try to tell my upper belts is, hey, you guys got to speed this up. You can't have them go left blow and just leave the arm hanging out there for you to grab it, because that's not real life. You got to react to it, and you got to react to these things real quickly. And in my Tai Chi classes, we do something called push hands, and there's different variations of people trying to use their internal power. And when I see these guys do their stuff, it doesn't look like they're touching you because they're barely touching you. But they're shifting all the time. It's just like what you said earlier, George. You said shift, you got to create, you got to be creative. Anyhow, that's the way I operate. And there's one time I was at an Aikido class with this friend of mine, Rick Rawl, was teaching, and he was a Army Ranger and had been deployed a couple of times. And I happened to be there when one of his students came back and said, I'm ashamed to say this, but I got really mad at this guy that we caught. He had planted an IED, and I was trying to kill the guy with my hands, but I couldn't do it. And George said, what were you trying to do? So I was hitting him in the throat using a full fist. And George just stepped back and said, okay, I don't teach you guys this, but since you're out there, use a bear claw. You got to get him underneath the chin, hit him in the throat with your knuckles, not a full fist. You can't get it in there. And he said, and he looked at me and said, I'm going to teach you things that I don't teach other people because you're out there with your life dependent on it. So he basically told me, goodbye, get lost. Took the other guy in and started teaching him other stuff. But anyhow, that's my story.
Okay, Mr. T.
I started off with a different take, I wasn't sure what the question was. Comparing the two, whether it's a preservative art, where you want to do it exactly the way it was 100, 200 years ago. I don't think those are intended to be self-defense as much as they are just preservative. It's like a live museum. And there are people who are fine doing that. That was all I was saying, is they're not in it necessarily for self-defense. They're in it for other reasons. Same reasons people do ballroom dancing or do dressage. As far as teaching self-defense, George, you solicited drills from us, what, month and a half ago?
I did what?
You sent out an email asking for what kind of drills do people do for street
Yeah,
defense?
there's something I sent out that had like with one attacker or multiple attackers and different exercises you could do to increase a student's or decrease their response time to attacks. And I can send that out again. It was just things that I would do in class, like, we call it circle of fear or line of fear, or, some artsy name. And it just, you could line up 6 or 8 pairs of students and without going to the mechanics of how it's set up, say, do something for a headlock. And if you have 8 teams out there, every team might be doing something different. And I really wasn't concerned what technique they used, but that they did something. And as I said, for newer students, it might be simply getting out of the headlock, getting a release. For other students, it might be, they take the person down and put them into a reverse pin or something of that sort, depending on their rank and what they knew. But I think you're getting back to topic, which is, what is our intent in teaching the art? And like you said, for some, it's to preserve an art as it was taught 200 years ago. And that's legitimate as long as that's the intent of what's being taught. And like you said, it could be for dressage or ballroom dancing or how to cook steak, or it can be for anything. It depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want to cook a steak fast, or do you want to cook a steak so that it tastes delicious and is edible? And I think that's what that was the original intent. What is the purpose? And both reasons, whether it be to preserve an art as it was taught, 500 years ago, or teaching for self-defense, both purposes are legitimate.
True.
But I think part of the problem is that sometimes people can confuse I don't use the word confuse the two, because that's not legitimate, but they have a misunderstanding of why they're going in. They have a misunderstanding of what they're training for.
Yeah, it's true.
And go ahead, Tom.
Well, when I had new students come in to observe before they decided to enroll, I would have conversations with them and find out what they're looking for. And there were times when I said, this is not the class for you. I know where there's a school that would better fit what you're looking for, whether it's BJJ or Danzanru, which are probably two opposite extremes, that we're focused on self-defense. I'm using it with the structure from Jujitsu, Japanese Jujitsu, but we're focused on self-defense. And if that's not what you're interested in, that's fine. There are other places that would better meet your goals.
Okay, that's fair with that.
Yeah.
I can go with that. Okay. Do we want to do anything else with this? I mean, the only other thing in this topic is that if you're practicing for self-defense, the only two safety factors are, one, you have to have enough mat space. And you can't have, if you have a, let's say 24 by 24 foot mat space, which is a lot of space, you can't have more than maybe one or maybe two teams out at a time if they're going through a series of, just where the tori is just being constantly attacked by one or two or three people. You can't have 5 or 6 teams out on that mat. Whereas if they're practicing kata or how to do a technique correctly, unless it's something like tomonagi or you could probably have 4 to 5 teams in that mat space, and they could train safely with each other with that many teams up. So one concern is mat space. Another is when students are training in mats in street situation training, you have to have better supervision. They have to understand that the word mate, which is about all you can do, because again, you do not get in between people that are fighting. They have to understand what the word mate means. And they have to understand the concept of tapping out. And then the only other factor is speed. If they're practicing for street, you can't tell them to slow down. Unfortunately, because that's speed is if they're in a state of motion, they're not in control of the speed of the execution of the technique. If you're practicing a technique, as a sensei, you can say slow down because they're trying to learn the technique. But if they're doing quote unquote self-defense, again, the intent is different. And it's hard to say slow down, but the uke, the other person, has to realize I need to pay attention to what's happening to me, and I need to be able to tap out or say mate before I get hurt. And part of this goes back to the tori, or the person doing the techniques, so has to know by feel whether or not the technique is working. I mean, there's mutual responsibility on everyone's part if you're practicing self-defense techniques. Okay, there is a certain amount of reality courtesy, for lack of a better phrase. I mean, if you know a technique is set properly and your uke is not tapping out, but you can feel that this technique is being done properly, what do you do? Do you stop the technique, or do you continue through and possibly injure your uke? And those are, and you don't want to, people don't like to injure their classmates, for lack of a better phrase.
Not usually, no.
No, not you. Not usually, right. And I think in all my years of training, I've only had maybe one or two who violated that concept, and we would have a conversation about, the reality and mat courtesy, and you can't injure people with intent. It was one thing doing it accidentally, but doing it with intent is an entirely different matter. That's what people go to jail for. Okay. let's shift topics before we run out of time here today. Excuse me.
But we'll have fun with this one.
We'll have fun with this. How many of you are left-handed?
There.
Okay. Now, surprisingly, the amount of people in the world that are left-handed, I think it's in like 12, 14%. And if you ask a jiu-jitsu class, how many people raise your hand if you're left-handed, it exceeds that. There's
Oh, I hadn't heard that statistic. That's interesting.
yeah, I don't know why. And maybe it's because when a new student comes in and we tell them to get into their tachiwaza or ready position, what foot is forward?
Hmm.
The left foot. What hand is forward? The left hand. Okay. I know we're trying to protect our right side. But left-handed people have a problem with this. But we don't have, okay, left-handed people don't have as great a problem doing stuff left-handed as right-handed people have doing stuff left. I got myself confused here. Left-handed people don't have as much trouble doing things right-handed as right-handed people have doing things left-handed.
Yeah.
Because we live in a right-handed world.
Yeah.
And so most of the time we spend our time teaching techniques right-handed. But what do you see happening when you teach a technique left-handed? What?
The black belts become white belts.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay.
That's a good analogy. Black belts become white belts. Okay. And is the issue knowing how to do the technique, or is the issue now you're asking the other half of your brain to do what the first half is doing? What's I mean, when Seki used to say, okay, tonight we're gonna practice techniques left-handed. I mean, all the left-handed people were ecstatic because we have a much better chance of doing left-handed techniques correctly and more easily than the right-handed people will. And I don't know whether that's, like I said, it's because that's our prominent side, our predominant side. So how so do left-handed people have an advantage in self-defense training?
Can I chime in for a second?
Sure.
So you're going to have, I mean, in a perfect world, you're going to have a combination. And you know, a couple of my teachers, they always taught they always taught the patterns and the training from both sides, because you know, it's one of those things that the situation is going to be unique, that you're not always going to be on one side to do anything. You're always going to have to adjust, and you're always going to have to not just adjust, but you're going to have to modify based on the situation. So some of my teachers had always taught both sides in anything that we've ever done. Hurry up, Sam.
Did we lose him?
Are you with us still, Jason?
I'm sorry, the phone. I apologize. Yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So we've always had to have a combination of both. Now, I'm not saying right hand did left hand stuff perfect or vice versa, but the movements will change. The variation of the movement will change. The application, I hate to say, will change in ways. But if you have a base foundation, the technique will never change. And in perspective, it will just modify in such a way that now you come up with a various combination. And I think it's a beautiful idea. I'm going to be honest with you. You always want to be outside your comfort zone, if that makes sense. When learning stuff, you never want to be unique. Always, what's the word I want to use without lying to you? You never want to be in comfortable. You always want to be thrown off your feet, and you always want to be challenged, if that makes sense, to adapt and modify on the fly. And that's going to be key, because that's essential in anything that we do. I mean, that doesn't just apply to martial arts. It's just even work in our work life. You're always going to be challenged with something, and something's always going to change. And the way we do project management or we build something, things are going to change. The techniques are going to change. The standards are going to change. Well, you can apply that to martial arts as well. And I think it's just in a sense, all I'm saying is that it's great to have, to be flexible, I guess is the word I'm going to try to use. I'm trying to be generic enough to not drown you guys, but at the same time, universally adaptable to whatever comes at you or whatever is thrown at your way, because that goes back to tradition versus also reality or self-defense. You're never going to know until you know when it happens. And that is one thing Ron Yamamoto, one of my teachers, taught me. And, we used to do Sinanagi, and over the throw shows, we do these exercises, and we would be doing these things countless times, to the point where people would get so bored with it, they want to quit the class, because that's all we did. But it was because we were doing it wrong. And though he would finally, like you were saying, your teacher would say, "Hey, finally you got it right." Well, after a while, you started learning and correcting yourself and realizing what you're doing wrong. And my teacher was old school judo, so he came from a second generation under the founder. So this guy was ruthless, and he didn't hold back. And you do it wrong, you can get hurt. And I'm just saying, knocking the wind out of you. I'm just saying, for example, when you get thrown on the ground and you don't roll perfectly, and you all are judo jiu-jitsu practitioners, you understand what that feels like, right? So I'm just saying, is adaptability is a very, very beautiful thing if you understand, if you can apply it right in your school and your teachings. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you have to be, like a better phrase, you have to be flexible. And as I said earlier today, that's why Seki taught, he didn't teach one way to do a hip throw or Koshinagi. I mean, there must be 20, 30 ways that he's shown and had us, simply because he didn't want us to think that, there are very few street situations that can be handled only one way. Certain, street attacks that can be handled only one or two ways. There are very few jujitsu techniques that can only be executed one or two ways. And what he, if you stuck around him long enough, you would realize that, this is, once you have the basic concept of the technique, there are a lot of ways to use it. And so ultimately, what you're after, what he was after, is that if, for example, if I'm going to give you 20 different attacks, I want you to use a hip throw for every one of them. A black belt could do that. And that was his goal, to get you to realize that you can use, there may be different ways of getting into that hip throw, Koshinagi, but ultimately you could pull it off. I forgot what else I was going to add to that. And that was a skill he was trying to get us to realize. I mean, even if he was teaching a new technique, every time he showed it, he'd show it for a different attack, which drove students nuts because they're trying to learn the basic moves of a technique, and here he's showing different ways of getting of the what are called the precursors to getting to the actual technique. And I don't know, maybe what he did that just to relieve his own boredom. I don't know. But you know, that's to, as you moved up in rank, that was part of the quote, lack for a better phrase, that was part of the fun of learning, was different ways of getting to your goal. And that in and of itself is a very important skill. Okay. What happens if what happens if you're trying to cut it? Just to sample, what happens if you're trying to cut a pie and you don't have a pie cutter?
Yeah.
Uh, can you use a fork to cut a pie?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Can you use a spoon to cut a pie? Yes, you can. You may have to use the handle end, but that's what you do. And I think that was something he was trying to instill, that the art is, I don't think any art is rigid. And the hard part in anything, and if we're all pretty well proficient, the hard part is learning how to play with your art. And I don't know if play is the correct word, but if you have choices, you can make choices. Now, one of the things, going back to the LAPD, one of the things they requested from us was, we want to have a common core of simple techniques we can teach our new officers so they can respond. And they knew they actually knew how people would react to being grabbed by an officer. And how an officer should properly, and what their initial physical contact should be with a person if they want them to go in a certain direction without it being offensive. But they wanted to know if there's a series of simple common techniques that officers could use for someone pulling away, someone trying to hit you, someone trying to grab you. So, are there common moves that we could teach our officers so they only have to learn maybe 5 or 6 techniques versus that could be used for any of those situations, rather than a whole bunch of techniques specifically designed for specific attacks? And for lack of saying, call it the KISS theory, which is keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, sensei, or keep it simple, students. That was their intent, because they didn't want to get into training that would frustrate new students. So, where was I going here? So part of and I know they were supposed to be dealing with the issue of teaching techniques left-handed, but it is, I think it is a greater challenge for right-handed people to learn techniques left-handed than vice versa, because as I said at the outset, left-handed people have to live in a right-handed world. Go into a hardware store and ask for a left-handed screwdriver,
or circular saw.
or a circular saw. But they do make circular saws. The blade is round.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Can I add something, Joe?
sure.
I have to admit that I have a hard time remembering or figuring out if a technique I'm doing is left or right-handed.
I agree.
When I started, I was the only left-handed person in our dojo, and everything was taught right-handed, and I didn't know the difference until we went to a tournament, and Chuck Yeoman, he and I were about the same rank, threw me in a left-handed Bansei Anagi, and as I'm going over, I'm saying, wow, this is really cool. But then he and I teamed up, and Adam Kennedy came along later. So our students had 3 left-handed teachers.
Oh, ooh.
Yeah. And then you would come out and teach a seminar, and my students were fine with that. But I had comments from some of the other students and saying, what is going on here? I don't understand how these techniques work. Well, just look in a mirror. Do it the other way. When I was in high school and college, I fenced, and I was the only left-handed person on the fencing team in high school. And when we went to another school, we all did pretty well because everybody on the team had a chance to fence with a left-handed person. I did not do as well against a left-handed person because I had no one else to practice with.
Okay.
So that's my story. That's why if all my students look like they're dyslexic and they can't tell the difference between left and right, that's my fault.
You're not at fault. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, I go back to, as left-handed people, we have to open doors right-handed.
Yeah.
If we open them left-handed, we get hit in the face with the door. So how do you say, for lack of a better phrase, left-handed people make a lot of accommodations.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And, but that's how maybe that's why there's a higher portion of left-handed people in the martial arts, or at least jiu-jitsu, because we've learned how to adjust more so. Right-handed people don't like that, but
No.
try and find a left-handed baseball glove compared to a right-handed. I mean, it's, you go into a sporting goods store and you see 20, 30 right-handed gloves, and you ask for a left-handed glove, and all of a sudden your choices are less than, really maybe 1 or 2, which is unfair. But I even thought of, we should set up an organization for left-handed people and go for equal rights, at least in the U.S. Because I think we're the largest minority group in the country if it comes to that.
We're 18%, probably we are.
Yeah.
George,
Yes.
Amazon.com.
What?
Amazon.com for your left-handed glove.
Amazon. There you go.
I'm sure they've got something for
I'm sure they do. Yeah. As long as you know what you're looking for.
Right. But I want to mention something about left-handed. When I was doing jujitsu, when I was first learning, everything's right-sided, and I did not realize the difference between left and right-handed until I started taking Aikido, and the instructor immediately you do one technique one way, and you do it the other way, left-handed and right-handed, and then it kind of slowly dawned on me, hey, we're doing left-handed and right-handed right off the bat. So I enjoyed it, and I realized that, hey, they had to apply to jiu-jitsu and judo too. And then later on, I went to a judo club in Concord, and Osotogari, basic throw. And I realized the teachers taught them left and right off the bat, because in tournament play, you encounter more left-handed people. They said, confuse the left-handed because they're not used to throwing left-handed people, just like Tom said.
Yep.
I thought it was kind of funny, and then my Aikido instructor was saying the techniques themselves are very simple. I said the difficult part is how do you get into that position to use that technique?
Right.
And
I
if you
think,
know both ways, it makes it a lot easier to do both, do your throws or your technique, whatever you want to do. So
once you make that connection, then the techniques are a lot easier to execute.
yeah,
And I think it's more of a mental attitude than physical, because physically you can do it if your mind lets you do it.
yeah.
So, okay. Next topic is unless someone has something else to say here. There was a request to deal with women's self-defense issues, but we dealt with that a few months ago, and we had a actually in June 15th conference, and we had a lady who taught women's self-defense, and I think if we were ever to do that again, I'd want to have one or two women on the panel as well, because it's different approaching it solely from a male viewpoint. If you're teaching, because there are things that come up that you don't men don't normally deal with, for putting it as tactfully as possible, or we're not aware of. Anyway, so we're going to go to value of stretching exercises. And this, to an extent, has nothing to do with the martial arts and everything in terms of exercising, because some exercises are done to build strength, others are built to for purposes of flexibility. And I initially got into stretching exercises in backpacking, because at night, the way you warmed up your sleeping bag was to do stretching exercises and then relaxing, or forget what the comment where you have you're contracting and relaxing your muscles at the same time, where they're fighting each other. I forget what the term is now. Mind went blank. There's a type of exercises. I'll do it with my students. Say, pretend you've got a pillow between your hands and you're squeezing it, but the more you squeeze it, the more resistance you get. And there's a term for that type of exercise. And you can warm up your sleeping bag in 5 minutes by doing those exercises, because it creates body heat. But stretching exercises, there are two stretching exercises I also learned from Seki, and he would take the approach, if you want to stretch more, you got to try to stretch. And I forget who it was. I connected with someone. They said, if you want to stretch your muscles, relax, which sounds like a contradiction, because if your muscles relax, you can get an extra inch or two out of your quote unquote stretch. And the purpose of stretching exercises is to increase flexibility. And so their approach was, if you relax, you can stretch your muscles more than if you try to stretch them. And ultimately, you'll be more successful. So I have a I mean, I have a stretch routine I'll do a couple, 3 times a week. It takes maybe 10 minutes tops, 5, 10 minutes. And when I taught jujitsu, I would have the students do some of those as well. And the easiest way to get the concept across is the exercise of, touch, stand, keep your legs straight, stand, you're on your feet, stand up, bend over, try to touch your toes. And some people, they really strain to see how close they can get to their toes. And I say, now I'd like you to try it again without trying. Just get to that point and then relax. And if they relax their body, they find they can maybe get an inch or two more. They get maybe an inch or two closer to their toes. And the trick is then to take that concept and apply it to the martial art. If your body is relaxed, well, A, you may not get hurt as much. And secondly, if you're doing a technique, you can move your body more easily than if you try to get into a certain position. Maybe it comes down to if your body is relaxed, you can feel the other person and you know how you can move your body to get to them better or to get into whatever you want to do better. But that's not a stretching exercise. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Any thoughts or and I've got reasonably good flexibility for an 81-year-old guy. It's not as good as I'd like it to be, but it's pretty decent. And my doctor's impressed that I can bend over as far as I do. So, any thoughts on stretching exercise or the value of them, or do any of you use them or teach stretching exercises?
I'm mobility limited because I have a lot of aches and pains and stuff. And I went to a physical therapist yesterday, and the exercises she gave me are basically stretching exercises. She thinks that if I could get my ligaments and stuff stretch a little bit more, I won't hurt as much. And I've been going to the gym and I've been trying to put on more muscles. And she says that will help too, but actually stretching these leg muscles is going to help you more. And it's kind of surprised me when she said that. But something you said, when you're doing a technique, and if you relax more, you can feel the other person more. And that's kind of like the principle in push hands. And I noticed a while back before I started taking push hands, when I'm putting an arm bar on a person, you try to use strength as much as possible to pull the person down and hold the arm bar. And I realized, hey, if I relax more, I could actually put more pressure on the arm bar than if I'm trying to use all muscles. So I've been playing with that with the different techniques. If I relax more instead of trying to use muscles to do the technique, it actually flows better and works a lot better. Especially when I'm with these other guys that do push hands. It's kind of amazing to me. But right now I'm trying to get my legs working a lot better. I have never been very flexible in my whole life.
Yeah. Well, I've been through 2 joint surgeries, joint replacements, and from the first surgeon, I learned that when I have a knee joint replaced, went through physical therapy to a point and I wasn't happy with what they figured. If I could bend my leg 90 degrees, they were happy.
Yeah.
And I said, but I used to be able to kneel down completely on that leg.
Yeah.
And I said this to my surgeon, and he said, well, that won't happen because the range of motion of the artificial device is only so many degrees. He says you can get physical therapy up to the but you can, once you get to that limit where the artificial knee joint itself won't compress anymore, bend anymore, that's all you can do. And that turned out to be, instead of this being the limit, which was the original physical therapy, I can get to about here. And that's the limit of the device itself, not my physical being. And so when I had shoulder replacement, I asked the surgeon right off the bat, I said, what's the range of motion? So it's, as you guys, if you're getting joint replacements, ask this question, okay? Because then I could say to the physical therapist, I want physical therapy to the limit of the range of motion of the device. So I have, right arm, I have full range of motion to the device. And, that's I can't go beyond this, but that's because of the device, not because of the muscle structure or ligaments. And that's it's just some, most people aren't aware of that as they get older, that if you know, it's kind of like, if you know your art, if you know what the technique can do, if you do it properly, such as a wrist press on an arm lock, as you said, is you can keep the rest of your arm relaxed, and then you can feel whether the pressure that you're applying with your hand is working or not, and you're doing it by feel. That's because this part of the arm is all relaxed. It doesn't have to do anything because it's all leverage.
Amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, in a future issue of Kokoro, there's someone asked, if I've been at parties, and sometimes a person who's somewhat inebriated asks me to demonstrate a jujitsu technique, and I could probably do a wrist lock takedown on him, but I don't want to hurt him. What can I do? And I said, well, it's happened a couple times with me. You use it's a hand for a handshake. And I said, you tell them ahead of time, I'm not going to do anything that's going to hurt you or injure you. There's zero risk. And what you basically do, so it's like some guy gives you the death grip on a handshake. They're trying to impress you with their strength. Well, all you really have to do is let your hand relax, which will cause your hand to collapse. And that makes them work harder. And you can even say to them sometimes, you can use both your hands if you want. But then what you do with your middle finger is it presses on the, let me see if I get it. It presses on the ulnar nerve, I think it's lung 9 or something like that, right here, just with the tip of the finger. And Seki taught that. And it's just, light to medium pressure. That's all you need. And I don't understand that Thomas is familiar with this technique. I'm sure. I'm not totally familiar as to the reason why it works. But it completely negates all their strength, and they can feel it. But what I think happens is, if we want to go into the theory, is by pressing that nerve, putting my fingertip on that nerve, not flat-handed like that, but just the tip of the finger. What it does, it takes all of his ki and sends it back into him. And that negates it. That's the only explanation I can come up with. And I don't know how true it is or not. But it has to do, it's a matter of you keeping the rest of your arm relaxed and your hand relaxed, and that allows things to work. It allows you to apply that pressure with your middle finger, and it negates whatever else they're doing. So the issue is, when you execute techniques, are you relaxed or are you all tensed up? Anyone want to answer that one? Or
Can I
let me,
take a crack at it?
or let me rephrase it. Can you execute a technique more effectively if you're relaxed or if you're all tightened up muscle wise?
That's kind of what I was going to say. So, again, it goes back to the type of situation you're in, because sometimes most people are already tense, right? If you've been in a situation where your adrenaline is pumping, always remember that you have to have that cool, calm demeanor. You have to be able to control yourself, and you can apply, maybe not as effective in a tense situation, but you can cause a lot more problems, like injuring people. But you can also, if you're trained properly mentally and physically, you can change your way of thought to be able to get in that cool, calm composure, to be able to apply it in a cool, calm manner, if that makes sense. It just depends on the person, but you can do both. Not both are effective, if that makes sense. And there are situations where you can actually mess up and do something wrong. And again, it's all about your focal mindset, how well you were trained, how well you apply things. There's so many, there's so many variables there that could go wrong or could go right. But again, it's all on the mentality of the person applying the technique or the movement, if that makes sense. Any objections?
No, I think you have a point there. It's if you're more relaxed, you can be more effective in being aware of what's going on around you. You do
Absolutely.
have better peripheral vision. You can respond faster. You can respond faster to an attack because you're just more aware of what's going on around you. I know from experience that if I can talk with a person in a calm voice, regardless of how I think or feel, you actually have better control of the situation, and you have
Absolutely.
and many times it'll actually calm the other person down, unless they're really off the wall. But still, you have to. And the sad part of it is, in a street situation, you have to maintain the illusion of, regardless of what you're thinking, you may have to maintain the illusion of you're calm, you're being, particularly in law enforcement, that you're being professional, that you're being courteous. You can't start in a street situation, at least I know with law enforcement, you can't use a bunch of expletives to get the person to cooperate, because from a public image, it creates a bad public image, and you've lost right there. And secondly, it's only going to aggravate the person you're trying to control. And
Absolutely.
and that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do, is to maintain their calm when another person is excited. I've even seen that happen in rescue situations in backpacking. If a person's really, I've seen people get really upset because I've been in that situation, and the person who was in charge was also able to maintain his cool, and some of the other people were just running around like chickens with their heads cut off, because we acted calmly, because you do that because you don't want to make the person who's injured feel any more get excited or frustrated with the situation than they already are. And part of that is being relaxed. How do you do that? From stretching exercises, because you have, to successfully defend yourself, you have to be relaxed. Does that make Tom or Irving or either of you want to jump in that one?
Is something Jason mentioned, is that triggered a question. Okay, so if I commonly put you in an arm bar and I've got it and I got you down, but being a sadistic SOB, I want to break the arm. So do I switch from being relaxed to using pure muscles to put the 8 to 12 pound pressures to break the arm? Or do I stay relaxed? And when I see these push hand guys, what I see them doing more is they're defending and deflecting. So I never see where they have to use muscles, so to speak. They don't go for breaking arms and stuff. They just want to keep deflecting the person, basically. So any thoughts on that? Once I get an arm bar on you,
Yeah, well,
It's actually a really good question. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, early on in my black belt experience, I was teaching Seki's class one night. Some of you know this story already. The 10-year-old kid in there set an arm bar on me, figure 4 arm bar. And I wanted to see what would happen if I resisted. Stupid. I dislocated my arm, elbow. He didn't do it. He just held on. And Seki chewed me out for the next month or two every time I showed up in class for being stupid. I mean, but that was a learning experience for me. I spent most of my time trying to keep the kid calm because he was upset that he had hurt someone. Fortunately, the elbow popped back in right away, and there was no permanent damage. But the thing is, you like with an armbar, if you do it right, and I don't know which type of armbar to return, it is really easy to dislocate the elbow. And I thank that kid that he taught me a very valuable lesson, because I didn't think he would be able to do anything. But if you're relaxed, you can feel at what point there's going to be injury.
Mm-hmm.
And that's with any technique you do. And that's the hardest thing to get a student to learn, is to be able to feel. And one of the ways I used to do that, particularly with upper belts, is back to Amazon. I bought a package of eye blindfolds. They're really cheap on Amazon, and had the defender put the blindfold on. And I don't know if Thomas was there when we did that once.
We've done it a couple times when you were there.
But what you have to control is the defender, because since he can't use his eyesight, he tends to move a lot faster when he's doing a technique, and you have to get them to slow down to avoid injuring the attacker. And now the attacks are limited to grabs where there's body contact. But it just provides another example how if your body is relaxed, you're going to be able to defend yourself better and more efficiently. And maybe that's what the value of stretching exercises is, that it teaches you that relaxing allows you to move your body more than if you would try to move it otherwise. I don't know.
It goes back to that goes back to Mr. Kirby when you were talking about mobility and flexibility, be able to stretch, and how important it is to stretch. And Sir here was also interacting with you in that conversation when I was listening. You're going to have some kind of stretching and reflexation type movements in your training, because you're going to have to keep those joints and that oil, that your body fine tuned. I hate to say that, but as we get older, you got to keep them. You got to keep that body flexible, at least in a manageable state. So probably all of us have war wounds, but the reality is, you have to keep your body, going, and stretching. And when you get over a certain age, is more important to us than it is with the youngsters, and especially in my class. And I have 20-year-olds that think they're going to be 20 forever, and they do stupid things and they end up injuring themselves. Even when you have to smack them across the head after they hurt themselves, and you get a lot of these people. And that goes back to your statement. You're always going to have to maintain a level of some kind of exercise in your program to keep people from hurting themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but mobility is going to be key in everything we do, at least for myself when I get older.
Yeah. This brings up the only 2 times I've injured a student, and it's been twice. One was a brown belt, the other one was a black belt. Was when they knowingly resisted either a throw or a submission. And I mean, yes, I feel very bad that I injured them, but they apologized to me afterwards for one reason. Their response both time was, I wanted to see what would happen if. And that's a hard way to learn a lesson.
That's true.
But sometimes students will, just something to be aware of as a sensei, sometimes students will resist, maybe up to a point, because they want to find out what will happen if I do resist. And if I'm doing a technique where I think there's a chance, a good chance, relatively good chance of injury if they resist, I'll tell them that little story. I said, it's not really worth it. It's like asking what will happen if someone points a gun at me and fires. Well, you're going to get a hole in your body. Is it necessary? I mean, you hate to see. I know when I was about 12, 14, I was in downtown LA with my dad, and I guess there had been a robbery in a parking lot, and the guy had been, I don't know who it was, whether it was a suspect or the victim, or there were police around. There were police there by the time we got, but he had been shot in the head. It was a graze wound, but it was messy. And I remember that picture, and I don't care to have that, how do you say it? Seeing things in real life is a lot different than from seeing it on TV or in a movie or what have you, with makeup and all that other stuff. And that makes an impression on anyone. And I think as sensei, we want to do our best to keep our students safe and in one piece, so they can come back to class.
Right.
So
it's getting close for us to shut down, but
yeah,
going back to my question and what you said about relaxing and an armbar, my number 2 son was kind of ornery, and my wife would have to drag him by the arm, and she never put any pressure. It's just, when you're grabbing a kid and you're pulling them along. And my son twice dislocated his own elbow by twisting. And so I'm thinking, hey, it's nothing my wife did. It's your own victim, that you victimize your own self. So I think what you said, just being relaxed is enough to be able to dislocate the arm or elbow or shoulder or knee or whatever. I don't think you have to use a lot of force, but you have to know how to do it.
Yeah. I think dislocating an elbow only takes like 10 or 12 pounds of force.
Yeah,
Isn't much.
That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
But the third time my son did it, I happened to go to ER with him, and the doctor just did a crank on his elbow. I said, oh, I could do that. Save myself 3 hours in ER.
Yeah. From experience, you have to be if you have a student who has a dislocation, do not try to reset it.
Yeah.
I've seen PE teachers reset dislocated shoulders from students, and sometimes they're successful, and sometimes what happens is that them resetting it, because they're not medically trained,
Right.
it puts a nerve into that shoulder joint,
Yeah.
and then they do need to go to the hospital. The doctor has to dislocate their shoulder again and get the nerve out of there. And then, there are things you don't, I say first aid training is supposed to train you what not to do. But anyway,
actually, that's what the doctor said to me. He said, don't do it yourself.
Yeah, it's not worth the risk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to stop at this point. I know we got off track on all topics, but that's okay. Right now we have a total of 6 topics left. If any of you have any ideas for future topics, please let me know. I mean, I'll take almost anything. Including.
Can I send you an email? Can I contribute? I have a couple ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to go into them in some detail to give me a sense of direction, or I'll come up with my own sense of direction, which isn't always right, or what you intended. So, please feel free to do so. Because I
can do that for you.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So
I will make sure next month I will be on video. I'll go in an area that's not open, and I'll make sure I be present in the video.
Okay. And I hope for all of you, Halloween was safe and there are no negative experiences. And I don't know what you're going to do with the leftover candy. We went to Amazon and got the 200-pound bag, and we have 199 pounds left.
Oh wow.
Oh,
I think we had a total of maybe 10 kids. It's not like when I was a kid, We didn't even have teenagers this year.
Wow.
My son.
We had nobody last night.
My son bought 9 boxes of candy that had like 230 pieces. He gave out 215 pieces.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
I mean, too many people are having car trunk parties, or too many groups or organizations are having if you know what those are.
Yeah.
So, because I guess parents are afraid. Kids aren't, but parents are.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's another issue, Kids will do anything in the dojo if you tell them to. Why? Because they trust you. That's a good topic. Most kids will try.
Bad choice at times too.
Yes, it's a bad choice. Yes. I mean,
there was a guy that actually, I don't know if you heard on the story where that guy was putting razor blades in apples back east somewhere.
Oh, yeah, that's an old.
This was like 30 something, maybe 40 years ago. But I'm predating myself. But it was to the point that actually some of the kids didn't hurt themselves bad, but they had bit into the apple and got some got lucky and missed the blade, and others actually, had a little perforation, but it wasn't like anything major, thank goodness. But it happened, and they arrested the guy, and it was stupid. But they, people are loopy sometimes, and they do stupid stuff. And I'm glad there's some good organizations out there that allow these kids to be able to Halloween and trick or treat in a safe environment. Because you never know these days, and you see everything you guys are doing, teaching these kids to be safe and these adults, and then you read the stuff you see the stuff on the news, or you're actively involved like myself, and having to see this stuff in real life, it's just so stupid, man. People are just, I don't know what happened to society. I hate to say that, and that's another topic, but I'm not even going to go there. I know we're running for a short time, but
Yeah, I know.
I will. Sorry, go ahead.
When Kimberly, when she was a kid and she'd go trick or treating, we'd have her empty her bag on the kitchen table.
Yep,
And
you're the same.
then I'd say, okay, I want you to take out anything that looks homemade, fresh fruit, anything that's, fresh, sealed container, and that's sad to have to do that, but that's a reality. But we didn't, you know, uh, I don't know, maybe some parents aren't, I hate to say it, aren't smart enough to do that with their kids, or don't want to, or it's okay to be, as a parent, yes, it's your responsibility to be protective. Um, but the other side of the coin is you want kids to learn to have as much freedom as they can. Uh, you know, it's in jujitsu, sometimes you have to allow kids to make mistakes and fall and maybe get a, minor scratch or owie. I mean, I've had kids in the class who, and when I taught them, they'd get they'd get hit in the eye because they didn't block. And I wouldn't have to say anything. The other kids in the class would tell them, they tell this kid, you need to learn how to block better. It's many times kids' peers will tell them how to get their act together. It'd be nice if adults could do that too without being insulting.
And just that's well said.
Anyway, but yeah, maybe how do you communicate with kids differently than you communicate with adults? Maybe that's a good topic too.
Oh yeah, that's
Have to jot
kids
that down.
Language.
Yeah.
It's how to communicate. Yeah, because I try to use humor as much as possible, but that's because being serious gets you nowhere most of the time.
That's true. That's true. And you lose their interest pretty fast.
Yeah,
With youngsters.
Yeah.
And
I'm just going to repeat one story. When I used to teach at the junior high, we'd have gang problems, and groups of one gang would come on campus, and if I had 3 or 4 people around me that are all from the same gang, usually the person who was trying to distract me, I just tell whomever I thought was in charge, say, put a leash on your chihuahua. And somehow they got it. And they tell this person who was trying to distract me to back off. Because what do chihuahuas do? Bark a lot and bite at your heels. But Thomas knows this is an old story from me.
Yeah.
Ancient. But it's sometimes humor is more effective than you can get a serious point across more effectively with a slight sense of humor that doesn't really insult anyone. Anyway, okay. So I want to thank everyone for putting up with today, and have a good weekend. I don't know what you're going to do with all the leftover candy. We'll have to do something. I would just soon throw it out, but I'll probably have a few myself. And we'll see you on the December 4th, I think. November 1st. No, today's November 1st. It'd be like December 4th.
December 6th.
December.
Yes, December 6th.
Yeah. So hope to see you then, and bring some friends with you. And
thank you all for sharing. It's always, every time I've been here, it's been a great and very informative. I appreciate you all for your years of experience and knowledge, and passing down to the youngsters like myself. No offense. I'm in my 50s, but I just say that I appreciate y'all, and I will definitely try to make more. I just was out of town. I couldn't do anything the last couple of months. I've been gone overseas, so I just got back about 6 weeks ago. So now I'm back park stateside. So yeah. But anyways, long story short, I appreciate y'all, And thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
Okay, take care.
All right.
Thank
Take
you all.
care.
Bye.
Take
See
care,
you guys
Colin.
next month.
Take care,